A successful business doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of hard work, dedication, and persistence, which is exactly what the Coffee and Hustle podcast is all about. Welcome to today's Coffee and Hustle podcast, and I'm talking with Carla Boonhay, owner of Charlotte's Chi. She is an all-around girl boss, entrepreneur, single mom, immigrant, and she represents the strength and courage with all these challenges that she has overcome and still continues to build her success. Hello and welcome to the Coffee and Hustle podcast. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a woman's power. I'm Carla with Design by Carla, and joining me on this podcast discussion is Carla Boonhay, owner of Charlotte's Chi. I actually pronounced your name pretty good there, so I'm good. I'm glad. One star for me.
Yes.
So welcome and thank you for taking out your time today to come and speak to us about who you are, what you represent. Because I want to say this, you are a entrepreneur, single mom, and an immigrant. And so how does that title, how does that represent you when we're talking today, when we're talking about a woman's power? How does those three pieces represent you?
So they all have become one. You know, they're not compartmentalized and they're not separate entities, but they've all become one. Being a solopreneur and entrepreneur, that has always been in my genetics, kind of. It's always been a desire. I always knew that I couldn't work for someone else forever because I don't like being told what to do and I want to call the shots.
You know, my father was one of those people. He was a true entrepreneur. I would call him the original OG in entrepreneurship, because back then they didn't have books and school for it. You know, now that you go to school, but you still don't know how to do it. Right? You're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur today. But it's a lifelong dream, right? We don't know that we're doing it. But I think the one thing that he said was there's two kinds of people in the world. There's leaders and followers. He said, which one do you want to be? Okay. And I said, well, I don't follow. And I don't really take directions from people very good either. So I'm my own person. So you feel that same way?
Absolutely. I started working at 15 years old, and I started in retail, and I climbed up the ladder rather quickly. I was in upper management by the time I was 21. But even then, while I didn't mind the long hours and the hard work, I just didn't do well with a lot of the direction and the instruction that came from, corporate and upper management. Set it up this way, make it look that way. I always thought, no, we're going to do it a little different. And I would definitely receive a lot of feedback for that.
We all get feedback.
Right.
We all get that feedback.
Right. And so it was about, I moved to Huntsville 18 years ago, very haphazardly. I was just going to come visit. My mom was here at the time, and I was just coming through to visit because I was making my way east. I was going to go to New York, and I was going to conquer New York because why not, right?
Right.
I was 25, and of course the world is at your feet, and you can do anything and no responsibilities. So yes, let's do it. But when I got here, she made an offer that I thought, you know what, I'm going to jump on it. I'm not staying, but I'm going to take the offer. And she said to me, if you stay, I'll pay for you to go to aesthetic school. And I said, okay. And then when I'm done with that, I'm out of here. And it didn't happen that way. Aesthetics led to massage therapy, which led to personal training, which led to yoga certification, which led to everything that now encompasses Charlotte's Chi. And Huntsville has been so amazing to me as an entrepreneur in that my customers are so loyal, they're so wonderful. And I realized, yep, I don't want to work for anybody else. I will create my own thing and I will take care of people the way I want to be taken care of. And I'm going to charge for it, but I'm going to offer the quality and level of service that I deem appropriate in this industry, because sometimes it can be a little bit of a hit or miss.
And I think that's something to be said about that, because when we're starting to listening to our, our instincts or intuitions, we don't really listen to them as much as we should. you did that. You kind of stepped outside that box, and you developed something that you would never have thought about. You would have, if you would have not stopped here in Huntsville and you went off to New York, would you think that you would still been an entrepreneur?
Absolutely not. You know, it's safe to say that if I would have headed east, I would have definitely found, I would have gone back into retail and just climbed up to upper management in retail. Or I would have gone back into the corporate world because I had spent some time in corporate America and realized I hated being pinned to a desk. So it's likely that I wouldn't have, and I mean, I can only imagine that I may have headed back, and the dream would just started later rather than sooner.
I think it's crazy that how our roads are intertwined, and somehow we get to the end of this road and it's either going to go left or right, and we choose a path. And sometimes we go back to look at that path. I don't know about you, but I always reflect back and go, if I would have chosen to go this direction, how different our lives would have changed. Because I can remember back when I was in college, I got offered to go, I was working in retail, and I got offered a leadership position to go off to train at, it was back then it was called Gayfers, before it was changed over to Dillard's. Dillard's bought out Gayfers. And Gayfers was down in the Mobile area, and they wanted me to come in and do merchandising. And I said, no, I want to continue with my college degree at that time. And so how crazy it would have been. I look back and go, wow, I could have been in that retail business as well. But I think that I think I was just destined to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't know it at the time. But I needed that extra push. Do you feel like your mother pushed you a little bit?
So no, not my mother. My mom, while she dabbled and desired to be an entrepreneur, you know, one of the things about being an entrepreneur, and this is my philosophy, you wake up unemployed every day and you have to re-employ yourself every single day to everyone that you're doing business with.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Especially in my industry, because people have so many options. So for them to continuously choose to do business with me, it's because every day that I wake up and I realize I'm unemployed, I need to go out and re-employ myself with the people that I'm doing business with. So it wasn't my mom, but it was my grandmother. So my grandmother only had a third grade education, and she lived very poor, grew up very poor, and then just had a ton of kids. Like there's a dozen of them, okay? And even though she had all these kids and her, you know, she had very meager options available to her, I remember as a little girl, her house, she would hustle a little like market, little corner like stand from her house where she would sell cookies and Cheetos and little knickknacks that kids walking home from school, because there was a school at the end of like the street down the ways where she lived. So a bunch of kids had to walk in front of her house, and they would walk by her little stand and they would see her, all the cookies and treats and stuff that she had to offer. And that's how she hustled stuff. And then she hustled, you know, ironing for people, and she had to come up with creative ways
to make income.
Yes, around all of these kids that she had.
You know, could you imagine? I'm just going to say this. Back then, you could get away with certain things like that, because I can remember that too. But nowadays, you know, we cannot have those kind of stands in front of your house with food for kids anymore.
Even the fruit stands on the side of the road are struggling.
You know, I mean, so you cannot sell. But anyways, I think that's a really good thing, because did you realize it at that time, or no,
not at all.
You didn't pick up on it.
I don't even think that I connected all of that up until a few years ago. You know, you were talking about I chose to go to college. One of the other things that has really pivoted my business and my career was becoming a mom. I wasn't ready per se to start a family, but my ex-husband was pushing for a family, and so I compromised, because that's what we do, right?
Right.
And I thought, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And so once my daughter came along, I realized, well, I can't go back to retail because the hours are insane, and who's going to take care of her? And if I go back to corporate America, then we're going to stick her in daycare all day, you know? So Charlotte's Chi has grown with Isabella alongside me. She knows how to come into the business and run a session if she needed to. She knows how to maintain the studio because it's what she's been taught. And had I not had my daughter, the motivation of how I structure my business, of how I cater to my clients would look very different.
You know, and I think that's so important is that I think that we've paved the way a little bit in the women's, where we talk about women's power, right? In some ways or another, we see the gradual aspect of like back then, because I can relate to that my grandmother had a third grade education. None of my family members even went to college. And now I was the only female that actually went to college and got a degree. And it's actually the only female on my mother's side of the family that actually has a business. And so in that transition, we start to see this women's power, women's strength of moving from not having anything at all and watching our families suffer, because my grandmother was very poor too, to here we are in a whole different path. And so do you see your daughter taking on some of your personality and being able to do things differently, or do they not understand the path that where you went from to now?
I don't think that she quite gets it yet, just like I didn't get it up until a few years ago. You know, as I look back, I realized that it was my grandmother and her circumstances and the fact that she had all these kids that motivated her to get creative in order to produce an income. And likewise for me, it was having my daughter and then becoming a single mom shortly thereafter that motivated me to get creative with my business. Do I think my daughter sees that? No, not yet, but I'm sure she will.
One
you
day.
know? Yeah,
One day.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that at some point she's going to look back.
She's going to have that aha moment. Now I understand.
Right.
Now I understand. And I think that makes a big difference because like my kids always saw me working. I literally, you know, I had certain rules. You couldn't come into the office at a certain time of the day. You know, you can entertain yourself for a little bit and let me just do my job, because I had to provide for them. Just like you said, we wake up every day as entrepreneurs always thinking, who do we need to contact? We always got to stay in touch with people. We're the hustlers. We're always hustling for business and always hustling with our clients, because like you said, they can choose. There's a lot of us now.
Absolutely.
Right? Because back then when I first started my business, I had my babies, my little girl, and trying to keep up with that. I just did just enough to where I could feed them and pay my bills.
Correct.
And you just survived. And now you're like, oh, okay, now I really can do what I want to do with my business. Do you feel that way?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I remember, so I started my business from home, and I would have a room dedicated to all of the aesthetic services and the massage therapy services that I offered. The training side of the business didn't come in up until maybe the last 8 years. Okay. So that's a newer division for the business. But I remember doing massages with Isabella in her little rocker thing. You know, when they're babies, you put them in those little carriers that rock them so they can stay asleep. Okay.
Yeah. You're like, stay asleep, stay asleep.
Literally, it was a prayer that she would not open her eyes and start crying in the middle of this massage. Yeah. And like I said, I was lucky enough to have clients that were so understanding. And I hope that on the other side, it was that I'm that good or was that good. They were like, it's worth it just to get a massage.
Yeah.
From you.
Well, back then, because, you know, I didn't get to go to, you know, we didn't really get to hustle and go out and meet people because we were trying to balance being a mom and being an entrepreneur. We didn't have like another person, a nanny sitting over there. Let me take care of your kids while you go out and build your business.
Right.
And as I remember when my twins were born, I was still working at the time, and I had my business hustling websites on the side, but I was also working full time. And I had my twins. I'm out shopping, and I see, because I knew there were other sets of twins born on that same day, and there was this girl. Their twins are about the same age. And I'm like, oh my gosh, when were they born? And find out they were born at the same day on the same hospital. And I'm like, oh my God, that's wonderful. How's it going? She goes, oh, I'm just the nanny. And I'm like, well, why can't I have an, you know what I mean?
Be my nanny too.
Let me be my nanny too. But you did what you had to do, right?
Absolutely.
And do you feel like that's what you had to do? You just kept doing it because you were determined.
It's funny because to me, it didn't seem difficult at the time. It was just the only option that I had. And so sometimes when I sit with other single moms and I talk to them about my story, they're looking at me and they're like, how? And I think to myself, I didn't have an alternative. So there really wasn't another option. You know, I was a single mom and my life was transitioning. And so you just had to do it. And I look back now and I really am grateful for all of those setbacks, because I'm a firm believer that in those setbacks or challenges, or when you're really being crunched real tight, you're either going to drown or you're going to come up with these crazy, like out the gate ideas.
Yeah.
And you're going to go and do it and hope that nobody calls you out on it, you know?
Yeah. Some people, and it's funny because over the years, like some of the information that I share with people is like 20 years of information that I've had stuck in my brain. And I think one day you're going to get to be able to plug that and put it in your brain. But you think back, but the basis of our business is still the same. The model is still the same. It's basically, I always believe that word of mouth business is the best, most important aspect of your business. And it's important to know that. But every day I would pray. I was like, please someone call me. Please be a check in the mail. Please let me just pay for my children's formula. You know what I mean? So I can really say that I can look back and gosh, I could have given it all up and worked at a corporate job, worked at, you know, anybody that is determined can do what we do. If you have determination, it is hard. It is stressful. Is it emotional? There's times where you want to cry. But you kind of go, you know what? I got to put my big girl pants on and I just got to do it.
Absolutely. You know, as you were sharing that, I'm thinking to myself, there was this one instance where I was so financially limited. And so we were subsisting on spaghettis and pasta sauce, right? And thank God for me that that's all she wanted to eat too. So, but there was this one day in particular where I had no money and I had no food. And I remember sitting in my bathroom trying to hide out and crying, thinking, oh my God, how am I going to feed this kid today? And thank God I have enough dog food because I had 2 dogs too. And I thought, if I don't sell something today, we're not eating and I can't have that. And I started sending out text messages and finally a customer responded and said, hey, can I come by and pay for this now, but can you just get it to me later? And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And it was like that was a prayer answered, you know? And so it's almost like now there are times that I'm like, oh my gosh, if we DoorDash one more meal, I'm going to scream because certainly we can get ourselves to the store. And it's gone from one extreme to the other. And it is a blessing to see that. But like you said, there is so much information that we have to offer as entrepreneurs and as females to other single moms and to other entrepreneurs coming up. And I certainly hope that somewhere along the line, I'm afforded the opportunity and the luxury to share that. My business now has a structure that has offered me a flexibility that I would have never imagined. You know, I certainly didn't have it when I launched the business, and not just the flexibility, but the affluency that has come with the business has been a far more than I could have ever dreamed of.
You know, and I'm going to say this out loud too. I think also we go through the emotional detachment too of people that don't believe in what we do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the hard part is that there is a stigma to us of like, that they expect you to be a certain person all the time. And they expect you to be a mom 24 hours of the day. They expect you to be a wife 24 hours a day, and then a little bit of room for your business. And I'm going to tell you that you have to put your priorities in order. Now, you may hate me for this, but sometimes your business comes first over even some of the simplest things your children need.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you have to set up some sort of like boundaries. And sometimes, you know, you're just going to have to say, you know what, I can't do this today with you. You're going to have to you're going to have to put your big girl pants on or your big boy pants on, and you're just going to have to handle this. I've got a business to run because if I don't run my business, I can't feed you.
Exactly.
Right.
Definitely have experienced that. Not just with my daughter, who I'm so fortunate that because of all of that, she's very independent. She's very self-sufficient. She's very mature. She's a really smart kid. So I'm really blessed with my little girl. But with family, you know, so much of my family I've had to distance myself from, not because I don't love them, but because they don't share the vision. They don't understand it. They want to provide their feedback or their input or their suggestions. Well, yes, and I'm using those words, but really that's what it is.
It is negativity. And that's a big part because we are our worst enemies, right? We're our own worst enemies because we wake up day going, we doubt what we do. We doubt are we doing the best that we can do?
I definitely don't need anyone to criticize me. I'm really good at it myself.
Yes, we are our own worst critics. And then you've got family, and I'm not saying not just family, but also friends.
Sure.
So you have to be, as you grow your business, like, and I always call it the 7-year, change. And I don't know if it happens less than that, but I think there's always a 7-year change in our business, in our attitude, our mentality. And you probably could talk about that a little bit more because of your business. But I do think there has to be a point in time where you have to detox yourself from people that are not positively influencing you.
Absolutely. My circle has gotten really, really small.
Tiny, tiny?
Tiny, tiny.
Maybe 2 or 3 people?
Yes. Like I can count it in less than one hand.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because it is critical that the people that I allow into my space be in alignment with the vision and the mission that I'm on. And those that are not, I cannot make room for them, And sometimes, we're talking about kids, and sometimes our kids wake up in a funk and they have a bad attitude. And I'm like, no, stop it now. We're not even going to go there, And so sometimes I step back and I think to myself, yikes, this is really harsh for her. And then I remind myself, that's okay, because I'm not looking to raise another victim. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
So, you talk about the 7-year turnaround or the 7-year step up and transition. Charlotte's Cheese started back in 2007. And then I put the business to rest for about 3-4 years because Isabella was getting complicated trying to juggle it. And fortunately back then, my relationship afforded the luxury for me to stay home with my daughter. So then I relaunched the business and started to look at the business differently. And it was back in, so we are actually, oddly enough, we are about 8 years out from that relaunch. Okay. And in the relaunch, I realized, okay, we're going to leave out the aesthetics and the waxing, and we're going to now introduce training. And that evolved also to introduce and launch yoga. And we kept the massage side of the business, and it just provided for a whole new face and a whole new approach for the business. And in those last 8 years is when that circle has gotten real, real tight, and the things that you choose to put your time in and the events that you choose to go to and the way that I start and end my day are so critical to how my business is going to continue to succeed. And I've been able to gauge that in the last 4 or 5 years. For the first 3 years of the relaunch, the business was, we were just barely making it by the skin of our teeth, In the last 4 or 5 years, the business has really started to experience the growth. And it's in some of those habitual changes and working with a personal coach that really helped me structure all of that, all of those habitual changes and how it went in, day out, and how the business was structured and what we offered and what we did and how we ran it. All of that was what led it to the growth of the business in the last 4 or 5 years. So yes, that 7-year window is critical.
So when you're talking about your business, so talk about a little bit about what you offer now. Like, what are the things you're doing? Because you said something about that you're now helping stroke victims, and what was some others that you put in your list? I think we were talking about your demographics are within a certain age group too.
Yes. So I am personally 43, and a lot of people don't think about fitness in their 40s except to, oh my God, I'm so fat and I need to lose weight. I'm not really interested in that part of it because the aesthetic changes and benefits will come. My focus is to work with the demographic of individuals between 35 to 85. And so I do have a lot of older clients, more seasoned clients that are recovering from, I have one customer in particular who came to me almost 2 years ago, a year after he'd had a stroke. And we continue to work with him to help him become more functional and to help rehabilitate the left side of his body so that he gains a bit more mobility. Is that ever going to be back to what it was before? No, but we want to help create some type of activity on the left and then a little bit of balance so that he doesn't always just have to lean on his right side. I've got customers that have had lumbar surgery and coming back from that, and shoulder surgery and hip replacement and knee replacement. And that is the specialty of my clients. And the demographic, like I said, the age range also is, we approach fitness very differently because we're not going to be doing a ton of jumping around and hopping off boxes and tables and stuff, because that's not going to serve my customers. You know, my customers are going through physical changes. Joints are starting to hurt and ligaments and stuff, and they've had injuries.
I'm older than you, though, by the way. I'm going to say that out loud because you said you were 43, and I'm like, you're over here talking about injuries and pain and waking up in, I don't know, I mean, Peyton doesn't have to worry about that right now, but my producer, he's in physical shape. But me, I'm like, I'm over here, I work out a lot, but I can tell you it takes me a little bit to get out of the bed now. Whereas I think it hit me around 30s or 40s when things are starting to slow down for me. So my lower back hurts, my knees hurt, you know what I mean? But for you, you're helping people with some real major injuries.
Yes. And I've experienced some health changes myself. You know, I did a figure show back in 2007 before I got pregnant with my daughter. And that was bodybuilding and figure and all that encompasses. Okay.
How nice.
That's really where my love for fitness just took off. I'd always been about, you know, playing sports and running. And I used to run marathons. But then I started, after I had my daughter, I thought, well, I don't have 3 hours a day to be at the gym getting ready for a show or at this, you know, level of fitness. How do we change it? And I thought, well, I don't have 3 hours, but I can do anything in 30 minutes, real tight, very well organized. I can break a sweat to where I'm a puddle mess on the floor and feel good. And so you're talking about that shift. At 41, felt a shift, a physical shift. I started to, things were hurting more and I felt tired all the time. And I was struggling to get through the day. I was still struggling to get out of bed. And my day starts my first client is at 5 a.m. So I'm out of bed at 4 a.m. I've got to go get my workout in real quick so that I can be with my customers. Okay. But a shift happened for me at 41. And so just a few months ago, I had a major surgery that kind of catapulted a bunch of other health issues for me. And I'm currently waiting on final diagnosis, but I recently received an MS diagnosis and running through testing of all that. And then I had COVID back in August, which led to my hair falling out. I mean, like drastically falling out in chunks. And I thought, I have alopecia. I'm going to be bald, you know. And I had to take a step back and realize, hey, first of all, calm down, okay? Get yourself together because this is not as bad as some of the other people that you work with.
So it messes with your mental.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that when you're in business as an entrepreneur, we're always testing our mental state, you know, and so when things, like even the smallest things affect us or the smallest things fall apart, we overanalyze it just as much as a client does. And so we have to be just as strong for our clients as even for ourselves. And so,
but just as empathetic as well, because when you feel great for the better part of your life and suddenly you experience a shift, it's very humbling and it almost brings you to your knees. It brought me to my knees for some serious prayer, but it also allowed me to step back and listen better to my clients so that when a customer walked in and said, you know, everything's kind of hurting today, I'm not feeling great, I can instantly restructure what I intended to have them go through in our 30-minute session and realize, okay, we're going to move a bunch of stuff around.
How many sessions do they have to go through to even go, you know, to get to feeling 100%? Do they instantly feel different when they come in, or does it take, depending on what they have?
So they instantly feel different in that they feel worse before they feel better. And I like to be transparent with people about that because, and this is a joke, but it's not really. I tell my customers when they first sign on, I say, hey, get yourself an industrial sized bottle of Aleve because you're going to need it. Okay, we're going to be using and moving muscles that you haven't been moved in a long time. So I want you to expect to feel tired, to hurt, to be hungry, to be thirsty. And here's how we take care of all of that. Here's how we cater to it. So a customer comes on board with Charlotte's Chi, and first of all, they receive a complimentary assessment session, 30 minutes. I want to see if you can move and do some of the basics. All of my sessions are 30 minutes, okay? I do require that my customers sign on for at least 2 sessions a week. 1 session a week isn't going to cut it. I only have you for 2 30-minute sessions, and then you've got the rest of the week to yourself. And if you're not doing your part, then, you know, we've got to try to create some balance. Along with the 2 sessions minimum a week, we do consult with nutrition, with supplements, with structures of what additional work they could do outside of our studio sessions so that they can receive results faster. And everyone's sessions are different because everyone's goals are different. I have females coming to me saying, oh my God, Carla, I'm about to turn 50. Look at all the crinkle on my legs. We talk about that and what that looks like for them. But the reality has to align with, hey, what are you not willing to do? And that's one of my first questions in an interview with customers. What are you not willing to do? And then they tell me about all the things that they want to do. And I'm like, yeah, that wasn't the question.
But what is it?
And I've had customers say to me, you know what? I'm not willing to give up my glass of wine with dinner. Okay, great. Then let's adjust your expectations so that they're more in line with what is going to happen based on what you're not willing to do.
Are you ready for a transition?
Correct. Yeah. So, the customer really dictates what we can do for them to some degree. We turn around and offer a plan, and then I always say, hey, it's up to you. I'm just here to walk you along the journey. You pay for the sessions. The yelling is complimentary. Okay.
So I'm just going to say that there's a mental, but there's a physical, but also a mental transition that you work with too, because you're not just there going through the motions. You're actually helping them not physically feel better, but mentally feel better.
Those are things that I call paychecks of the heart. When a customer comes to me, and I've had it happen multiple times, when a customer comes to me and says, Carla, I hadn't told you, but I came off of my depression medication a month ago. And I'm like, should you have done that?
Right. You can't self-diagnose yourself.
Right. And they're like, yeah. No, I'm just feeling so much better. I'm sleeping better. I'm in a great mood all the time. And this is the only change that's happened in my life. It's the working out. It's the changes in nutrition that I've made. I can't put a price on what that feels like. I can't tell you how many times I've sat next to a client crying because they're sharing, hey, coming here has really transformed my life. I just feel so much better. I look in the mirror. I've had multiple women say to me, I can walk in front of the mirror naked now and look at myself. Yeah. And
that self-empowerment is so important.
Yes, because it's interesting how I've had clients that when they started with me wouldn't even look up the mirrors in front of them, because I'll say, hey, I want you to pay attention to what you're doing so you can understand why I'm correcting X, Y, Z, etc. And I will watch so many women just look down. And I'm like, there's nothing but dirt down there. So can you have your eyes up, please? And I know, like I said, the yelling is complimentary. But I know that there's more to it than just that 30-minute physical session of them moving their muscles and sweating and losing weight and feeling better. There is that internal self-esteem that is poking back out, or if someone didn't have it, they're finally experiencing it, and that empowerment is happening for them, and you can't put a price on that.
Well, I think it also makes people feel like, and no matter who it is, but I think it gives you that self-empowerment knowing it's going to be okay. You are okay. And you can accept you for who you want to be. And you're not here to please anyone else. But also to physically feel better. The mental, I think, is the most important aspect in who we are, because I don't know, there's tricks being played in our minds. There's things that we see, things we hear. Yeah. The media plays these games with us. We are overwhelmed with our mental health issues already. We are stretched thin. We have to stick together and say, it's okay. You can pull from this inner strength. That's where all of this comes from. A lot of inner strength that we have to play this game with all the time, because there's that tiny little whisper going in our ear going, you can't do this. You can't be this.
It's that little devil on the other shoulder.
Yes. And you're going to go, yes, I can. Right. I can be anything I want to be. And I know that sounds silly and very crayonish, like schoolgirl stuff. But I'm telling you right now, you can do anything you want to, as long as you work hard for it and continue to build it. And I think that is a true statement to be made, especially with you're one-on-one with these people. you are that safeguard of, they're probably telling you things that they would not talk to anyone with.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I stress to my clients is our sessions are confidential. You can speak freely, and I'm just here to listen sometimes. But, I wanted to say something. It works both ways too. I feel like a lot of times for me, especially in the last 3 months that my health has been challenged, I have been able to have certain comments from my customers. Hey, you're going to be fine, right? And I'm like, yes, I'm going to be fine. And I think we're both lying.
Stress.
Right. I think we're both lying to each other, but it's really fed for me to get up on the days that I don't want to get up and said, you know what? I got to get to work. It's not about me today, so I'm going to be fine. And that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, you're right. That mental empowerment, especially with everything that we've been through with COVID over the last couple of years and how that has mentally taxed the world, we have to get back to some of those things that make us feel good. But some of those things that make us feel good hurt a little, like a workout.
Yeah,
which is why.
So I want to discuss with everyone on this podcast. You are not, so we want to talk about the immigrant. You came here at 7 years old. So tell us a little bit about your home, before you came here. How did you transition over here?
So I was born and raised in Central America, Managua, Nicaragua, and my native tongue is Spanish. So English is my second language, and sometimes I do say things real funny, but for the most part, I've worked really hard to compensate.
Funny. I'm from the South, and so don't think you just say things funny. I'm with you on that. I'm 100%.
So my parents immigrated here like most immigrants do, looking for a better life, wanting to give their kids better than what was being offered then or there, The country has had a great deal of political turmoil, and that's what it boils down to. And so the people are the ones paying for it. And even still, I have a lot of relatives still out in Nicaragua. And recently I was talking to a cousin and I said, I want to come out and visit. And she's like, oh God, no. Don't even. She's like, there's nothing to see. The streets are trashed. Everything's horrible. She's like, go somewhere else. Take your money and spend it somewhere else. And she's like, and definitely don't bring your little girl here. She's like, there's really nothing to see. But I remember coming to this country. I was 7, and I remember all of the struggles that my parents endured. My dad had to work as a janitor for a long time, and he's an engineer. He speaks 5 languages, but the best he could do was get a janitorial job here. And my mom didn't speak any English, and so the best she could do was flip burgers at McDonald's, but she's a cosmetologist, and she had some secretarial certification because that's what they did out there. So both of my parents were very well-rounded, and but the country, coming in as an immigrant, you kind of have to take whatever you can get, which is what really boggles my mind about some folks nowadays, because it's like beggars can't be choosers. But so I remember as a little girl watching my parents make that adjustment. My dad worked during the day, my mom worked at night, so that we were never left alone. And for me, one of the things that I share with women all the time is the things that I've achieved in this country, and I never finished college, because of the fact that this really is the land of opportunity. You can't tell me otherwise. My cousin in my country, same age, female, is a lawyer. She doesn't own her own car. She doesn't own her own home. It's all under her dad's name because it's better that way. And she doesn't make anything in comparison, Mm-hmm. And so for me to be able to do everything I do as a single mom, as a solopreneur, as an immigrant, speaking the language as a second language, you can't tell me that this isn't the land of opportunity, but it is for those that are willing to work their asses off.
Well, and that's the thing about it too, when we talk about opportunity, is that do we take opportunity when it's presented to? Mm-hmm. And that sometimes we have to take a hard look at that and go, do we look at those things? And sometimes people disregard the opportunity that's in front of them. Mm-hmm. And then also people take advantage of those because they don't really understand where we went from and what did we have, and now we're where we're at today, because we could have easily gone different paths, uh-huh. right? So you've taken an opportunity to come here to make something of yourself and be successful. Do you know that? Do you feel successful? Or do you feel like there's more?
There's always more.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Like there's a definition of success and how we define it, right? Not
yes.
really the definition that's in the the dictionary, but
absolutely. I definitely know that I have achieved a lot and that I am successful in my own right, in my business, in this industry, in this city. But do I feel like I'm successful? You know, I would hate to ever feel like I've arrived, because I think that the day that I get there, complacency might set in. And I really can't imagine living my life from a complacent standpoint or from a complacent place, because there's always more. I mean, say that I achieve all of my goals in business. Well, I still have goals to achieve as a mother, and where I want to see my daughter go, and what I want to see her achieve, and what I want to be able to give her. And then there's still going to be goals that I want to achieve as a woman, giving back to other women and having an impact in this community or anywhere else that I'm available to have an impact.
Well, we talk about circles, you know, when we talk about impact, success, and we talk about our small circle of people, a lot of times that we want to make sure we're aligned with those people that have the same type of goals. And where do you feel like that transition started with you? Like, even though we are our own success, right? We call it our own success, or where we want to be. Do you feel like having that business coach, that extra person that can tell you where you want to be, where you maybe didn't see it in that beginning, that's something that we don't always want to admit we need help, but having that extra set of ears and people that could give you that advice, do you feel like you get that from a business coach? Because you mentioned that, right? You mentioned you had a business coach.
So I worked with a business coach for several years, and so I'm going to do a shameless plug. It's actually Lori Fisher with Just Imagine, and she really took me by the hand in a period where the business, in those first 3 years when the business was relaunching and challenged, and she would ask the hard questions and not budge until I gave a realistic and raw answer. Nobody ever wants to give those, right? You share those in private in the bathroom in front of the mirror.
I'm one of those is like, I don't like to give full sentences. It's like one word, yes, no, and she's like, no, you're getting full sentence. So I'm like, no, so she sees things in you that you've not seen before. Or
Absolutely. And that's led to working with other coaches and other programs, but it helped to create a foundation for me because it allowed for me to learn how to do my business design and my the financial design of the business as well, because that's very important. So many people have great business ideas and they can't make the money work.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you feel like that in some ways or another? Do you feel like you wish you had that 7 years ago or 8 years ago? Would you have changed the model of your business if you would have brought in a business coach earlier?
So I did have it 8 years ago, and I worked with her for 3 years. I wish I would have had it in 2007 when the business first launched, because it would definitely be at a different level now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I recognize that we have to be ready.
Yes.
And so
timing's everything, right?
I wouldn't have been ready then. And so things happen in their timing, in their appropriate timing. I'm a firm believer in divine intervention, and I'm very big on my faith. So, I always tell people, hey, if you're having a bad day, drop a knee and pray.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Or I'll pray with you, whatever it takes. But
pray while you're driving, because sometimes I'm praying when I'm driving
absolutely,
down the road. I'm like,
best time to pray.
Give me guidance today.
But I am a firm believer that any entrepreneur should have a business coach alongside them, and not somebody from your inner circle. I was lucky enough that Lori was part of my inner circle, but I appreciated that she didn't hold back when it was coaching sessions. She had on a different hat on, and she didn't accept some of my half-assed answers. She would push and push and push until I got to the real answer. But every entrepreneur should be working with a business coach, because you need someone outside of you to hold the mirror in front of you and make you say the things that you're holding back.
My dad was actually my business coach in the very beginning. And those are very hard conversations where he would call me up and, ask me those questions. And so he was just that, what are you doing today? And why are you not doing more? And, and he would call me hard-headed and you're just stubborn. But I was so like him. And I can't see, like, I look at my business now and I'm like, I couldn't even imagine. I think back when I first started, I think about the children, and I think about where did it go from here to there. And I could have easily given up. I could have easily closed my doors and said, I'm not going to do this today. But I just was determined. And here I am now with a very successful business that I think is successful. It might not be the biggest business in the world, but it's my vision of what I would like to do. But now here I got a podcast and it's taken off, like, you know what I mean? So I recognize opportunity, and people like Lori, who's my business coach, by the way, a shameless plug. She saw things in me that I've never saw before. And so for me, it's like she saw more of me, and when I wasn't ready, it was like, I'm not ready for these kind of conversations, but I was forced into those conversations because when my dad passed, I had a part of me that was missing in that business. And so Lori fills that for me. So anybody that's got a business coach is a great asset to your business. But I also want to talk about, you said you could speak Spanish, right? So I said, I want you to say something in Spanish on the podcast, and we're going to translate it later, but I want you to say whatever you want to say to me in Spanish.
He disfrutado mucho esta plática. Muchas gracias.
Oh, I hear thank you in there. I hear thank you in this podcast. So is there anything else that you want to talk to about this podcast today? Is there anything you want to put in here about your business, about who's your influence? Who's your biggest influence, by the way? Let me ask you that.
My biggest influence, currently or just overall? What do you mean?
Overall.
So my biggest influence has been my mom, but not for the obvious reasons. I've learned from her a lot of the things that I don't want to do.
Learn by example.
Yes. And so it's motivated me to do things differently. And even my father, a lot of the things that I saw not great, I try to change into different. And then that hasn't always been seamless. Obviously, it's not a perfect world, but and then now my biggest influence and my biggest why is my daughter. I mean, on the days that I don't want to do it, I just do it, and I do it because I hope that someday my daughter can look back and say, you know what, my mom was my biggest role model, and not some, celebrity who's letting it all hang out and maybe not being the best example. I hope and pray that someday in the future, my daughter can say, yikes, that woman was difficult, but you know what, I appreciate it. And she was a role model to me. And that's really it.
I think that we just try to be the best that we can be. The best mom that we can be. The best business owner that we can be. The best representation of who we are. And I think that that's a true aspect. I mean, we all want the same thing. We want to feed our children, feed our home, stay, pay our bills and do those things. You've accomplished a lot in such a short amount of time if you really think about it.
Thank you.
Right? So you own it. You're definitely the girl boss. That a lot of people, you may not think that. And a lot of times that people say things to me and I'm like, wait a minute, you really think that
way? Who are you talking about?
We really look up to you. And I'm like, wow, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm like, should I say things differently? But we just be who we are, right? Because I think transparency is so important.
Absolutely.
Right? We play this game and we see people when you're like, I know you're faking it. But that's okay. You fake it till you make it, right?
Absolutely.
But we don't. You got to be human. You got to be transparent. And all those qualities about you are so true and so
thank you.
So transparent. So I just want to say thank you for coming on our podcast today.
Thank you.
And sharing your story is amazing.
It's been a pleasure.
You've overcome a lot of stuff with you. And I just want to talk about an important aspect of your business is still true today. You're still who you are. You represent it well. And so thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. And I definitely want to invite people to come and check out the studio or send me a message with questions. I'm happy to troubleshoot with anyone, even if they choose not to become a client of Charlotte's Chi. But we really are a well-rounded studio, and we do definitely offer the therapy side of the business and then the training side of the business. And so I invite anyone who's interested to just come check us out or have a chat, and they can decide.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Carla.
I appreciate it.